Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and I'm super excited to have psychic Aimee Cartier joining me today. And we're going to be discussing navigating the holidays as an empath. So I'm super psyched about this conversation because, boy, it's already tough out there. And when you're an empath, it just adds this whole other layer to it. So first, a little bit about Aimee. She is a psychic guide, intuition, and empath teacher who specializes in helping her clients and students align with their own highest good and discover their best steps in life. She is known for her clear and accurate insight and her compassionate and practical guidance. Her clients and students most often report feeling uplifted, empowered, or just better after a session with her. And I can attest to that because I've had a session with Aimee and she's awesome. She is the author of the books Getting Answers, Using Your Intuition to Discover Your Best Life, and the ebook From Heartbreak to Wholeness, 12 Steps to Healing from Heartbreak. She also writes essays, comedy, articles, and a blog. Find her on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Liz. So glad to be here.
So great to have you. I'm excited to see your face, my fellow Islander and friend. So let's jump right in. First, how about if we define what an empath is for our guests?
Okay, good question, because not all people know what an empath is, and not all empaths know that they are one. So an empath is somebody who feels other people's emotions inside their own skin as though it is them. So the empath comes in contact, as an example, the empath comes in contact, or somebody enters the room that's feeling sad or maybe even awkward. Somebody is having some strong emotion. The empath is suddenly feeling that as well. They're feeling awkward or they're feeling sad, or whereas a non-empathic person could definitely understand, oh, wow, that person's having a rough day or something, but they're not actually feeling it in their own skin. So that's the difference between an empath and somebody who's not empathic. The empath feels other people's emotions, especially there's other characteristics as well, but all empaths share the ability to feel other people's emotions inside their own skin.
Cool. Thanks, Aimee. You said characteristics. Can you name some of those so people can maybe align with those or
there are a
identify
ton
with
of them. Yeah. Your empaths are really influenced by other people's emotions, as you can imagine. So to the point of sometimes they can lose track of their own thoughts or feelings over something, especially if somebody else has really strong ones. They're like, oh, wow, they feel other people's stuff so strongly that they might lose contact with what they were feeling. Maybe they were actually fine and not feeling sad or not feeling awkward or whatever, to use that example that I gave. Some of the characteristics that often impact empaths, and specifically related to what we're talking about holiday time, they're generally the peacekeepers in their family or in the world, because they feel everything. And so they want to bring harmony. And also they understand the different points of view, right? So empaths are usually the people in their family who are helping everybody else negotiate their differences. Sometimes I think of how my stepmom revealed to me, like in the last decade, that she always thought of me as the get along gal, like growing up, because that's what I was like, right? I want everybody to feel happy, and I see where everybody's coming from. So I'm like, how about if we, like the peacekeeper, hold it together? Other characteristics are what I call over yesers. And I say that purposely. I purposely define it that way, because the empath is the person who feels that there's a problem or a challenge or somebody experiencing something, and they want to help, right? So they're like, I'll do it, or they'll volunteer for the job. They'll try to help solve all the problems, even at the cost of themselves. And that's a little bit what I want to talk to about today. So I'll kind of pause that a little bit and just kind of come to characteristics, keep going with characteristics. But empaths generally, they over yes, like I'm saying, they're the one that is going to help everybody without necessarily checking in to see, hey, is this is this the right thing for me to do? They feel a problem, and then they feel as though it's their responsibility to take it over. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So what can the yeser do during the holidays to kind of step out of that?
Yeah. So the first thing is really just to understand that there's a couple different things in play. I call them rules for my empaths, but the most important is to understand for an empath that just because you're feeling something does not necessarily mean that you are the person to solve it. It's a tricky thing when you're empathic, because it takes a while to learn that, because like I've said a couple of times in different ways, when you feel everything, and most of the time, it's somebody you care, like you don't want your sister hurting or your whoever it is that you're talking about. So you're like, I'll do it. Or have you tried? You're like trying to come up with solutions. Or an empath may find themselves in their own living room, not with anyone else, trying to problem solve for somebody else's life, right?
Yes.
That is a very good sign that you are picking up somebody else's energy, and you're trying to solve something that doesn't belong to you. So something vital for empaths to understand is you can't ever process another person's emotion for them. You just can't. So no matter how much you stew and think it through, or try to find a way for this person to shift it, because what you're feeling does not belong to you, the transformation cannot happen within you. No matter how much you problem solve for that person, no matter how many times you volunteer to solve the problem, or do the thing that you think will make it better, the transformation will not happen unless it's the person that is needing the transformation doing it. Do you get what I mean?
Yes. And I love that. Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah. So just like literally remembering for an empath, there's so many layers. One, remembering what I'm feeling might not be mine first, especially if you're new to understanding your empathic ability. Just recognizing, where am I in the room? Maybe this is not me. Maybe what I'm experiencing is not me. And then understanding that since you can't process other people's emotions for them, and you're also feeling things, it's vital to understand that just because you feel something does not mean that it is necessarily your job. Sometimes we have a hand and sometimes we don't. And usually for empaths, especially when they're first beginning to navigate and understand their abilities, they have most often thought it was their job way more than it ever really is. So one of the things I often teach my empaths is to do a simple question to themselves of, is it my place to help right now? So how that translates into, I don't really know what people are doing right now for the holidays, because we're in such a weird COVID-ish time. Like it used to be really, we may be around your family, maybe these family dynamics are coming up, all these kinds of things. Maybe you're the feast-keeper, maybe there's patterns in place. Now it's just like, who knows what's happening, right? Who knows what people are doing for the holidays? But these tools help beyond the holidays and beyond. So when you come up against especially we're talking about when you're tuned into people that are experiencing challenges or something really intense or hard for themselves. First thing to notice is that you may be picking up their stuff, and it's not you, it's them, not you. And I'm not trying to put an us and them situation, because that sounds weird. But it's important for the empath to understand, instead of being taken over by the emotion, wait a minute, this might not belong to me. And then you simply, before you try to problem solve, before you volunteer for to solve the problem, before you do whatever number of things that you might have done in the past or that you're inclined to do to help solve, you simply first ask yourself, is it my place to help here? Every time you ask, you will get an answer. Sometimes it's your place, sometimes it's not. And you have to ask every time. It's not like you're with your brother who's having a hard time and you're going to ask in that moment. It's not that whatever response you get doesn't mean forever throughout time. There's no helping him on this particular thing. You're asking in the moment to see, is it my place to help right now or not? And there's so many reasons why it might not be. Typically what my students find when they start asking this is that they have been stepping up to the plate like 90% more times than is actually theirs to solve. And once you start getting in the flow of asking this, you get an answer. It's either yes, in which case offer your solution, volunteer for the job, think in your mind, all the ways that we help people problem solve. Is there anybody that I know that could help? All of these kinds of things. If the answer is yes, go for it. Or simply ask, is there something I can do? Mm-hmm. If the answer is no, zip it. That's what I tell my students, and that's what I do myself. Even if I know what could help, what the answer is, what could possibly, or what's happening, etc., I do not offer, because when I get the no, I know it's not my place. I don't know why. There's so many reasons. Maybe they need to come to the same conclusion themselves next week, and that will feel really impactful for them. Maybe you're not the messenger. Maybe they need to hear it from somebody else, and it's going to be more important for them, or maybe they're just not ready at that moment. That's true for all of us, that we have moments where we're actually ready to have a change, or we're just sort of like stewing in the, not totally sure here what's happening. So the really simple thing is just before you speak to simply ask yourself, is it my place to help here? And if it's not, do not offer advice. I will usually nod and be like, that sounds really hard, or just acknowledge that I'm hearing them. I want them to understand that I'm totally with them and I get it. But if it's not my place to help, I do not offer to solve the problem. I just trust that there's some good reason why it's not me that needs to help.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I like that perspective too, because I've been learning a lot lately about how when we're not being able to ask ourselves, or we don't have that tool yet to listen to the yes or the no, there's always the ask the person, is it okay if I share an opinion with you or something like that? Right? Would you like, what I have to offer, asking the person for that consent, because a lot of times it's no.
Totally. And that's really legitimate. I always ask my friends when they're troubleshooting something for me, do you want to know what I see? And I love it when people, especially for empaths, because the truth is, for speaking from my perspective, and I think this is broad for empaths, even if I'm up against a conundrum, I often need a lot of space. I cannot hear other people's opinions. It's actually detrimental to me if I hear them first before I discover my own, because I'm empathic and I'm so highly influenced by other people's opinions. So what I what I need is space to discover inside what's going on for me. What do I need? What solutions do I feel? And then when the time is right, the answer will be yes. Yeah, I'd love to know what you hear, or I need some help. That's when I usually call my girlfriends. I'm like, I need some help. Here's this situation. This is what's going on. What do you see that I'm not seeing? Whatever.
Right.
But such a practice. But I would
totally
suggest
that.
I would
go ahead. You would suggest.
Yeah, I would suggest that the internal, is it my place to help, happens before ask the external to them.
Yes.
Like, for example, if you get a no, then you don't say, do you want to know what I see? Or would it help you to hear you don't even ask, because it's not yours. It's not your play.
Then you're practicing learning how to trust yourself. And then you can totally skip the asking part because then you've listened to your intuition and you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Honestly, I always also feel it as it's super useful for the empathic person to understand that and to use that tool, but it's also freeing for anybody else who's in their presence, because you don't necessarily, not everybody wants you to be meddling in their business or whatever. And you can, as any person has right to all their emotions. Sometimes, like I said, you just need to stew for a little bit in your stuff. So using these tools gives the empath the freedom to not feel like they have to solve all the things. And it also gives the other person the freedom to have their own experience without it trying to be shifted for them. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I know, especially for me, I need that time to process. Like it can take me 24 hours to process through something. So not having anything else to muddy that is really a gift.
Totally. And it's essential. I mean, emotions are like this essential gift that we all have. Every person alive goes through the range of them. So just because somebody is feeling one that's uncomfortable or quote negative doesn't actually mean that that's where it's going. That's just where they're at this moment. And doing so, being in that place, so much arises out of those moments for us individually. So giving people the space to the people around you, like I think of my family always, obviously, because they're always around me. I mean, my kids, my husband, of like, they don't always want an answer. They just sometimes want to like stew in, wow, Mom, I really wish we had an advent calendar. That's like the constant daily thing in our house right now. Mom, why did you buy us an advent calendar? Like every day. Anyway, random funny example, but I mean, maybe it's a funny one, not quite, because I could buy an advent calendar in this case. Anyway, the point is sometimes people just want to have their emotion and they don't want to have it wrangled by someone else, even the negative ones. That's true for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Plus, when we're saving, we're actually denying a person their own personal process, learning or a growth moment.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're assuming that it's terrible and that there's no good that can come from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that's always the thing that I see. The bottom line is it's the default to pity or feel sorry for someone. And I can tell you, as a person who has been doing readings for I lose track now of how many years, let's say 15 to 20, somewhere around there. Sometimes what looks terrible from the outside is actually a deep movement of the soul, sending somebody in like a really good way and a really good place, and something that is vital and super important for them. So I think the default of our society is to see just the shallow piece of it, the outside of like, oh, poor so-and-so, but that's not always true. It's very complex and intricate, the things that we experience in our life. So I like to give people the freedom to have their whatever it is they're having at this moment, and not just assume that it's terrible and they need you to save them or something like that. We don't know. You don't know where they're going.
No. And so you've got your empath and they want to save and they got their no and they're holding on to all of this emotion. So what can the empath do to release that emotion that they've taken on?
Good question. So I teach my empaths something that we call egg, and it's actually 2 tools, and I'll do both of them right now.
Great.
The first one is clearing your energy. And the second one is setting your psychic boundary. We spend a lot of time in my longer programs. I teach a 7-month program for empaths, really dialing this, because it's like the core thing to know and live happily in this world, from my perspective as an empath. But anybody can do it, and it's super easy to do. So it comes down to the first tool, which is clearing your energy, comes down to 2 sentences. They're really easy. And what I'd like to do is walk everybody through it real quick.
Sure.
Is that cool with you, Liz?
Yes.
Okay.
Please do.
So how it works is I'll just guide you all through it. And actually, I think we'll just go right into, when I'm teaching, I often separate them and then we chat, but it's just you and I here. So we don't need a lot of space for that. So
Yeah.
I'll walk you through the clearing your energy first, and then we'll move right into setting your boundary, what I call your egg.
Perfect.
I want you to, I'm going to leave space in between, and I want you to notice whatever you notice for everybody. There's absolutely no right or wrong. And we can talk a little bit about that afterward if you want to, of some things that people experience, but it's just for your noticing.
Great.
So
let's do it.
Okay. So go ahead and close your eyes and start with a couple deep breaths. This is just because it's a good place to start. And then I'm going to say the phrase, and I want you to repeat after me in your mind. And then I'll leave a little space and say the second one. And again, you'll repeat after me in your mind. Go ahead and just notice whatever you notice during that spot. I ask that anyone else's energy leave me now. I ask that all of my own energy return to me now. And now, with your eyes still closed, scan your body using your mind's eye and see if you can discover where the bulk of your own energy is holding. It could be anywhere. It could be your belly, maybe you're in your head, your heart. And once you have that location, I want you to, using the tool of your mind, start to pull on your own energy. And you're going to gently, gently pull from your own energy until you have some that is outside of your body. You're going to use that energy, your own energy, in order to create a bubble or an egg shape around you. Every part of your body is going to be in this bubble or this egg shape. Your hands, your toes, your feet, your bum. So that you are completely surrounded by you, by your own energy. Inside this egg, as I call it, is just you. Everyone else's energy stays outside. And now you have your egg in place.
Thank you. That was yummy. Oh, I loved how I could, for the first question, hold on, I'm having a hard time getting back. I was gone. No, come back. How I could feel the energy of everyone else lifting up. And we can so often, like when we get hooked into something or be thinking about something, our energy can be outside of our bodies and we're not even conscious of it, right? Or we're like, oh, I was thinking back that thing, I should bring my energy back, right? So having that second piece, I bring my energy back to myself, I think is so important, because then we're not picking up on people's energy because we've reached out to them, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Jeez.
I know, because we're over there trying to solve their things. And even I just find that we tend to bookmark things. Like it can be your kids, what they're going through, if that is your life, or it could be like a work project or something you're thinking on. We actually don't, we just kind of leave little bits of ourselves different places, or like thinking spots I discover. And
Yeah.
in my experience, when you're all in here, that's your best way to do all the things, whether it's, whatever it is, that's the project that you're working on or the thing that you've bookmarked. You're much more effective when you're all back here instead of pieced out into various places that we
Right.
parcel ourselves into.
Yeah, I feel way better than those 5 tabs I had open this morning.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. That's a funny way to think of it. Totally.
Oh my gosh. And I love the etheric egg, like that egg, that boundary that we're putting around ourselves. I love that. Thank you for adding that to it, because that's really important these days, especially with everything going on and everybody trying to hook into you and everything. I think that's important.
Totally. So I teach it that way because that's how I taught myself to do it all those years ago. And primarily because I wanted to know that it was me and me here. Like I use my own energy so that that's all there is here. But I rarely do it that way anymore unless I'm teaching. And so the other way that you can do it, if you're not pulling from your own energy, is just to really like pop an egg or a boundary in place. You don't have to pull from your own energy. And the reason why it's important, I feel, to say that is because if you are depleted in any way, or if you are sick, you are going to feel worse if you pull on your own energy. So you don't have to pull on your own energy. Again, I teach it that way because that's what I wanted to know when I was beginning. I wanted to know for sure it's me and me here.
Nice.
But when you pop it into place, you can add lots of layers. You can make it out of whatever you want. I mean, it's astounding what I've been teaching this for so many years now. And, people come up with so many brilliant and fun things to create their eggs out of. So, so play around with it, use your imagination. And once you start going, it kind of, it's oftentimes more like, oh, what does it look like today? I set my egg every day and it has its own shape and mind, depends on what I need, depends on what's happening, where I'm going. If I'm going into the city, for example, you can bet it's going to be very layered as opposed to me coming on my property to my studio where I am right now. So,
right. Okay. And we're stepping into those holiday situations now. So egg on before you go into those holiday situations.
Yes, absolutely. And you saying that reminds me that I should also probably mention one other thing because of the holidays. And if you're seeing your mom, you should know that your egg will never completely block your mother. And it makes me laugh every time I say that. But I've been doing this, like I said, so many years, and my mom is not a energetically pushy person. She's not actually trying to be in my space. And I can never fully block her, even though I'm so adept at this psychic muscle now. I can set one egg and it will be there until I go to sleep. I don't have to keep resetting. This is a really strong practice for me. And even so, even with multiple layers, even with all the things, I can never really completely block my mom. It's sort of like a rough muffling. And I say that because sometimes it's really important for people. They're like, oh, good. If you have a strenuous relationship with your mom, that's where the empath is really important to understand that your egg isn't going to totally block her. I feel that it is because my body doesn't actually recognize her as a foreign entity. I grew within her womb. And so it shares cells and, all kinds of things with her. So it's just a helpful thing to know if you're going in and you feel like you just have to know this works for everyone except your mom. It will only muffle her.
I think that's fantastic, especially with the science that's out about the shared cells and the cord and, everything else, and how we even support our babies, and what the baby gave us actually supports us, after, so we can continue
Totally.
to take care of them. So I think that that matches up perfectly energetically. That's awesome. Thanks for pointing that out. And so fun to have that extra
Yeah, I
layer.
know. It's funny. Totally. I haven't broken it to my kids yet, but they know egg, but they don't know that they can't ever totally block me yet.
I love that. Okay, let's dive into the holidays. How do we navigate that as an empath?
Well, I feel like the things that we talked about are the primary things. Understanding you're empathic, which means understanding that what you may be feeling might not be you. Setting your clear boundary, clearing your energy, and setting your boundary, setting your egg. Like I said, they're two separate things, but they're always do them together. It's no use clearing your energy all the time if you don't set your boundary. It's just going to come back in again. Likewise, is why set a boundary with other people together. And then just really understanding that just because you can feel something doesn't necessarily mean it's your place to help. And using the tool of asking, is it my place to help right here, right now? And then I would just add, we touched on this, but there's just an element that just for your own goodness of knowing that if it's not your place to help, you can trust it's for a good reason. There's some really, there's a good reason why it's not you. And there's an element of just kind of leaning back and trusting, like I said before, of understanding that just because something looks crappy at the time doesn't necessarily mean that it is. We all can go through all these specific things. So
cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's good work. And also, let's see, one of the things that I really had to work out when I was learning about my empath abilities was differentiation. So can you talk a little bit about that for our listeners?
Are you meaning understanding that you're different from someone else?
Yes.
Tell me what you're thinking of. Yeah.
Differentiating between what's mine and what somebody else's.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so your egg is going to help you with that immensely because you will be able to notice a difference. And I say so many times to my students, it doesn't matter anything I tell you, your experience will show you more than anything else I can ever say. Because once you clear your energy and set your egg, you're going to notice, oh, wow, I don't feel whatever that thing is. I suddenly am connected to my own experience and what's going on for me. And I can still tell that that person is having, they're sad or whatever. It's not that you are disconnected from what's going on. It's that you're not running it through your own body. When you're first discovering you're empathic, it actually takes a bit to remember and understand that, differentiate, as you put it, Liz, because you've been your whole life sucking up all the things. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't me. And maybe this is someone else, and other people get the right to feel their stuff. And I can still be in mine and understand what's going on for me without theirs. So egg is going to help a ton. And then another thing that I have talked about a lot during the pandemic, especially another tool that we've talked about practicing, because, maybe you're not going out in the world as much. Maybe you're working from home. Maybe you're just around your family. There's all kinds of differences in our situations than in most of the years prior. So one of the tools that I use, because this can happen even when you're at home without putting on your egg and going to the grocery store and seeing how different that feels, for example, or being at a coworker's party, or, things like that, where we're having more examples where we're actually physically bumping up against people in space. So we can tell the difference, is to do, I kind of, in my mind, I refer to it as like a tennis match. So you can practice by becoming aware. It's especially helpful, or I don't know, I would say most people start this when someone else is having an intense experience in the room with them. Okay. So like your son is having a my kids are little, so they might have more intense out loud experiences than most people do, but or most adults do, I should say. But you start by first recognizing, oh, okay, there's an emotion in the room, and then there's me, and you literally just ask. You can start by like a gamut of that's him or that's her, whoever it is, that's him and that's me. And you kind of do this like volley in your mind where you practice being aware of that energy and that it exists, and then coming back here and being aware of what's going on here. Because I'm, in this situation where we're talking about, I'm not actually upset about whatever it is that person is experiencing. I had one of my favorite examples of this happen from a student of mine whose husband had lost his job, and he was going through a period of trying to find a new job, and was having a moment where he was just like feeling all the feelings about that. She set her egg, she cleared her energy, set her egg, and then she allowed him to have his experience of whatever he wanted, and she was able to recognize, oh, this isn't me. So I don't have to like feel crappy. Or her husband in this moment happened to go for a walk right afterward. And she was telling us how, had she not been aware of this experience, his emotional experience would have, ruined the time that she had alone at her home doing whatever it is that she needed to do. Right. Having this differentiation allowed her to be like, oh, that's him, and that's totally okay. And he went on a walk with his feelings, and now I'm at home and I'm totally okay too. So this sort of energetic volley, it's really just like practicing understanding that you're different. And it's especially useful in your family because I've been doing this for years. I've said multiple times, but when you have children and a family at home, even so, you just get enmeshed. It's not like the like 10 years, 15 years I spent doing this on my own where it was so easy. And then, when you have a family, I got it. I am adept at this. So I understand the difference between someone else's and mine. And then all of a sudden you're a family you're all together and you're like yanked around by other stuff. Anyway, it happens to all of us is the point. But you can practice this differentiation as you were mentioning it, called even while you're at home. Just practice understanding, hey, other people are in the room having their own experience. And just because you can feel it doesn't mean it's yours, actually.
Yes. Thank you. So let's break it down a little bit more and go into that situation. If we are getting together with our family in the holidays and we are in close quarters and we are a little bit more enmeshed, is there anything extra that we may be leaving out that would be helpful for the empath?
Helpful for the empath? Well, I would say first that clear your energy and set your egg before you go somewhere. I mean, if you're going somewhere or if they're coming to your house, sometimes it's difficult for empaths to do it when other people are in the room. It's not always the case. It took me personally years to be able to set my egg with somebody in the room, but I have students who can do it like immediately, no problem. And I can certainly do it now in a crowd even. But if it's troublesome, if you're feeling like it's not really holding or you're not experiencing it, then I would suggest get alone. Like, walk to your bedroom. If you're having it at your house, shut the door for a second, be alone in a space. I always say that no matter where you are, you can always excuse yourself to the bathroom. Better yet, step outside. Yes. So I would be using these tools prior to arriving anywhere, for sure, because then you're not caught in all of a sudden in the moment. And I think useful for empaths also, if you're just beginning this and you're suddenly at holiday dinner, is just simply asking yourself when you're feeling things, is this mine? Because it might not be yours. There's a high probability, let's just say, that if you can't identify, one of the things that I teach in my students in how to identify whether it's your feeling or not is if you can't identify something that just happened to you that would warrant this emotion that you're feeling, then I be highly suspicious that it does not belong to you, because you should be able to identify a reason for especially a sudden shift in emotion or mood.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to pinpoint, oh, this just happened, which made me think of this, or whatever. If you can't identify, oh, why do I suddenly feel weird or awkward or sad or whatever, then it's time to go outside and set your egg or go to the bathroom, set your egg.
That's nice, Aimee. That's great advice. Well, we're hanging out with family, which takes me to hooks, because our families can always hook us, right?
Totally.
So what do we do in those situations?
Okay, so are you talking about immediate, like your kids? Are you talking about the people that you live with all the time? Or are you
Like your
talking about
sisters and your brothers and your mom and your dad, and you haven't seen them in a while and you're hanging out, and all of a sudden hook, right? And you've got that trigger, then what?
Well, it's sort of a different thing, because triggers are actually bringing up your own emotion.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
your egg is not going to prevent you from feeling crappy things. If you're upset, you're still going to feel upset, even if you clear your energy and set your egg. So it's slightly, it's definitely a different thing in terms of these tools, but I don't know. Something that I try to use is that I say try to use because obviously 100% doesn't happen, but is just literally when I notice that if you can catch yourself the moment that you feel triggered, you probably are not going to be able to change that. You can't change the trigger already, especially if it's activating you, but you can teach yourself to not respond to it, which slowly over time actually decreases the trigger, is what I found. Like the more often I practice not actually responding to the way that I'm triggered. So again, this is about dealing with your own emotion, really, because somebody else may say something to you, but like you're the one having the response. That's your stuff, not theirs. But I see that when I start to train myself to not take the bait, even if, sometimes people aren't even trying to bait you. They're like, in these kinds of relationships, they're like really just being themselves, and you're triggered by it, with family, with long-term things, with long-term situations. So not taking the bait, not reacting to it, like it's not as though you can prevent your body from reacting to it, but you can prevent your mouth if you can keep this.
I love
closed.
that. Yes.
A long way toward not creating more damage for yourself or the other person. But it also just starts to slowly allow you to not respond in that way. You sort of build up immunity by your own actions of like, hey, I can think of examples. I can think of the feeling, but not the exact thing that happened. But like, there comes this point where eventually you're like, they're not even trying to, like, they're just like literally saying what they would be saying. And like the response is mine. Like, while you're like, oh, that's just who cares? Like, why am I allowing myself to have this great response to it when they're just like literally being themselves? And I don't have to choose to feel all tight or agitated or sensitive about it. I can just be like, okay, anyway. So moving on.
Onward.
Yeah, exactly. So awesome. I do, before finishing that entirely, I do want to say that, because I do want to say that if intense things arise for you, that one thing especially helpful for empaths, but I actually feel like this is helpful for anybody, is just that tend to have a non-empathic person think their things intense and strong for them in a way that might not be for another. Like that's a deep thing that I need. That at that moment, in that moment, you try to zip it, move on with yourself, do something else, whatever you can to calm yourself, take deep breaths or whatever. But if it is pulling up something that is important, a valuable and penetrating wound that you have, I highly suggest that you bookmark time in another time and space when it's just you and you're alone to explore the feeling, because the fastest way through any junk, and I mean this in a lot of ways, I guess, but I'm talking about emotion, wounds, things like that, is straight through it. If you can dig in a safe way for you of like, what is there and how is that making me feel? And where do I even get that? And like cry your eyes out and punch a couple pillows. Oh my gosh, or whatever, I'm just saying, don't punch hard things, punch soft things.
Yes.
The easiest and fastest way through the intense things is straight head on, and then it dissolves. So, and I have a whole blog on that we teach a class on different emoting for empaths in my bigger programs, but even on my blog, I have something for anybody. It's called Go Ahead and Cry and Be Angry. It's good for you. I think
Aimee, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
So I felt like I had to say that because I'm not trying to belittle, just like, oh, okay, forget about it. Just don't like sometimes big stuff comes up and the work is not to ignore it. The work is maybe like to ignore it right then, or not say something that you're going to regret or create more pain in that moment. But big things need attention. And the more you can clear them out, the lighter and freer you feel. So
yes. I 100% agree. Thank you for sharing that. That was great advice. Cool. So we've gone and hung out with our families. We've taken on all this energy, even though we have our egg on us. What is some, because it's not always foolproof, right? Especially when we're just learning. So what are some self-care things that we can do after?
Okay. Yeah. Good. The first thing is recognize that you need self-care and give it to yourself is the second vital step. And I'm making a joke of it, but it's so not a joke. And it's also something that it's like, I feel like the whole world, or the worlds, according to Aimee, or the people that I'm in contact with, have this experience of, oh, I know I need that. And then I never do. And, it's not enough to know you need self-care. That will never give you the thing that you need. It's only enough to know it and do it. So, but so simple things. And it's really individual. I mean, I always counsel my students to like first start with what feels good to you. Like literally, what is your impulse? What do you want right now? I'm just randomly thinking of something I did a couple nights ago. This time of year, it's so dark and I just want to be dark. Like I want to be in the stillness, and I want to, I want to feel that. It feels like rejuvenating to me. And so the other night I turned off my phone, because otherwise I will, like everyone else, just like accidentally glance at it and then get sucked into it. So I turned off my phone and I sat in my bedroom. I turned off all the lights except for the salt lamp. And I literally just sat there. I didn't do anything. I think I did end up doing some meditation a little bit in, but just sitting in the dark is so healing, and I'm not doing anything. So I think it's helpful to remember sometimes self-care isn't necessarily about like going and getting a massage or planning this particular thing. It's about being soft with yourself and thinking like, what do I need right now? What would feel really good to me? And even if it's just a really small thing, like turning off all the lights and sitting in your bed for whatever, it makes an impact, and it allows healing, and it gives space. And sometimes it's really just that small. And if you can keep paying attention to those little small voices, then you get to avoid burnout, because you just it's little by little, small as you go along. And then you're not like, oh my God, I need like a 2 weeks on the beach by myself or whatever it is you need. You're like, no, I just sat in the dark. Sounds funny, but hey, also totally cheap. Like, no external things needed. Or
It
did
sounds
something.
lovely. Yeah, I could totally
Yeah.
feel like just picturing you in the dark with the salt lamp. I'm like, ah, God, that feels
So
good.
satisfying. I know it. I'm gonna try soon to have a all candlelight evening at our house. So like as soon as it gets dark, only candles. I don't know. It's just like small things
Oh,
like that, but
nice.
they're so satisfying. Like, to me, self-care a lot of the times just comes down to following your impulses. It's not this grandiose thing. It doesn't have to be like on your to-do list. It's like literally just, maybe it's just a book and the bath, and like allowing yourself to spend a few hours of the evening, like however many hours you want of the evening like that, without killing yourself about all the things you could be doing or you should be doing, or having mental turmoil about just simple small acts of getting on the phone with your girlfriend or whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah,
That's
just let
so
yourself
good.
decompress.
Totally.
Nice. Cool.
Make a creamy drink.
Is there anything that we may have missed that you would like to cover now that we're coming to the end?
So, yeah, no, I feel like we did a good job. We covered all the important pieces.
Yes, and it went so fast. Thank you so much for joining me. How can everybody reach you, Aimee? And what do you have to offer?
Yeah. Okay. So for empaths, I have a lot of different things, but speaking for empaths, because that's what we're talking about. On my website, I have a download called 44 Signs You're an Empath. I highly suggest, if you're empathic or you think that you are, either if you don't know, that's a good place to start. But even if you are, it's amazing how many things, if you know you are, it's amazing how many things that you may not know are related to personality traits, things about you that you may not even know are related to your empathic ability. That's a comment that I often get from people who look at this. And then it also includes an audio, which is 4 antidotes to common empathic challenges. So just knowing about yourself and how you're built as an empath goes such a long way toward helping you live happily in the world without feeling like you need to hide away or it's too much, because it's absolutely possible to live happily in the world as an empath, even when it's sometimes sad, like, as exists, it's still glorious. And it is not troublesome or super hard in order to be a sensitive human and be in this lovely world. So I would start there if you're an empath.
I love that. Thank you, Aimee.
My website is my name. Yeah.
Sweet. And then do you have a little jewel you would like to leave us with today?
Yeah, I think the jewel that's been coming up a lot for me is because we have been focusing so much for so long on all the strife and all of the discord that we're experiencing. And the jewel that I would like to leave is this suggestion that though we're seeing all of the discord, it's like a river underneath, like going through a tunnel. There's so much harmony and things reconfiguring and sorting out that is way below the surface. So I guess I would just offer that as a thought provoking for anybody who's listening, to understand that even though the discord feels the loudest, it's not the whole story. So
I love that, Aimee. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks for joining me. It's been great having you again.
Truly my pleasure, Anne.
Awesome. Everybody find Aimee online, and her name is her website. So super easy to find, Aimee Cartier. Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for joining me today. This is Raise the Vibe with Liz, and I'm your host, Liz Peterson. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Raise the Vibe with Liz, and my website at Liz's Healing Touch. Have a great day, everybody. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Bye, everyone.